see the listing of things in order. How Moses led the people into the desert of sin. In Exodus 16, God sends manna in the morning and quail in the evening. Moses commands Aaron to put some manna in a jar and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations. Then at Rephidim, Moses strikes the rock at Horeb with his staff, and water comes forth. And when we turn to page 3, which brings us to Exodus 17. Moses named the place Massah, Massah, meaning testing, or Meribah, quarreling, because that is where the people quarreled and tested God. Now let's take a moment here and turn to Deuteronomy chapter 9. There was a lot of things that were going on, and when we look at the progression of things in the children of Israel, being in bondage, wanting to be delivered, wanting to be set free. They get set free. But getting set free, they have these times of ups and downs. Well, Moses, you said this, and now we got this. When are we going to get to go? When are we going to get to go? Oh, we're going to get to go. Oh, no, it gets changed again. And so, but every time they get turned down, it's just, they're not happy at all. And they let Moses hear it. And then you see this back and forth taking place. Then they get to the Red Sea. We see that they get to the Red Sea, and then there's contention there. What's going to happen? Well, what's interesting that for me, and this is my personal, I like this as we read through chapter 9 here in Deuteronomy. Notice what's going on in light of what we've been reading and what the children of Israel have been going through. Let's go to verse 1 and begin reading there. It says, "Hear, Israel, you are crossing the Jordan today." Now I know this is advancing in time, and we're not there at that point yet in the story, but notice what's being said here as we read on. "To go in to dispossess nations greater and mightier than you, cities that are great and fortified to heaven, a people who are great and tall, the sons of Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand against the sons of Anak? So be aware today that it is the Lord your God who is crossing over ahead of you as a consuming fire." Remember the, yes, you want to close those blinds? Yep. Remember the pillar of fire, and remember that was present with them as they were traveling. "He will destroy them, and he will subdue them before you, so that you may drive them out and eliminate them quickly, just as the Lord has spoken to you. Do not say in your heart, when the Lord your God has driven them away from you, because of my righteousness the Lord has brought me in to take possession of this land. Rather, it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is dispossessing them before you. It is not because of your righteousness or the righteousness of your heart that you are going in to take possession of their land, but it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, and in order to confirm the oath which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Know then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stubborn people." Now, here we go. "Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to anger in the wilderness. From the day you left the land of Egypt until you arrived at this place, you have been rebellious against the Lord." So the Lord's trying to help them remember, even at that point. We see this happening as we're reading in the wilderness and all the things that's going on. It just seems like a constant tugging and pulling, and it just seemed like Moses can't win sometimes with the people. They have their moments, yes, but it just seemed they constantly revert back to this struggle that seems to be taking place. And he wants them to understand that when you go there, it's not because something you've done. And one of the things that stood out to me in all this, reading this, and we'll continue reading just a second, is that God is dispossessing the people that are there because of their wickedness. I find that very interesting. That flute goes great right this moment, though. It's like a bug flying around, you can't get it. When I think of the influx of people into our lands, in other lands, and you see the cultures change, I think back whenever Barack Obama made the comment that we're not a Christian nation, and seemed like he was adamant about making that point, pushing that narrative, rather than a nation that's built on godly principles, or at least a land that was begun with people that were seeking religious freedom. The burden of what they were experiencing where they were, and they come here, and it wasn't a pretty thing always. I know they had some issues to deal with, and it took time to deal with that, with all those things. But what's interesting, because of the wickedness of the people, God is bringing them over to dispossess them from that land. Let's continue to read there. Verse 8, even at Horeb you provoked the Lord to anger, and the Lord was so angry with you that he would have destroyed you. When I went up to the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which the Lord made with you, then I remained on the mountain for 40 days and nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water. The Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, written by the finger of God, and on them were all the words which the Lord had spoken with you at the mountain from the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly. It came about at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Then the Lord said to me, arise, go down from here quickly, because your people whom you brought out of Egypt have behaved corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way that I had commanded them. They have made a cast metal image for themselves. The Lord said to me, I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stubborn people. Leave me alone, that I may destroy them and wipe out their name from under heaven, and I will make of you a nation mightier and greater than they. So I turned and came down from the mountain, while the mountain was burning with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. And I saw that you had indeed sinned against the Lord your God. You had made for yourself a cast metal image of a calf. You had quickly turned aside from the way that the Lord had commanded you. So I took hold of the 2 tablets and threw them from my 2 hands and smashed them to pieces before your eyes. Then I fell down before the Lord like the first time, the 40 days and nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water because of all your sin which you had committed by doing what was evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. For I was afraid of the anger and rage with which the Lord was angry with you, so as to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me that time as well. Notice this, verse 20. The Lord was also angry enough with Aaron to destroy him. So I also prayed for Aaron at the same time. And let's continue, verse 21. And I took your sinful thing which you have made, the calf, and burned it in the fire and crushed it, grinding it through thoroughly until it was fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the stream that came down from the mountain. Then at Terabah, at Massa, and at Kibroth, whatever that word is, you kept provoking the Lord to anger. And when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, Go up and take possession of the land which I have given you, you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You neither trusted him nor listened to his voice. You have been rebellious toward the Lord since the day I knew you. And so as we go through, and then you can continue to read the rest of it there if you'd like, that passage just stood out to me. Each time we see the grace of God, as we're going through each of these little sections here, we see the grace of God, but we see the people, how patient and long-suffering the Lord has been with this people to bring them out. And so there's just several notable things there that stand out to us as we read it. If you have a comment or something you'd like to interject, let me know. Or we'll go back to Exodus on our paper here, Exodus 17.
Isn't it astounding that Moses was able to do those successions of fastings?
Absolutely. I can think about fasting and start getting hungry.
Me too.
There's a fast coming up, or we're going to do a fast. Whew. It's amazing. No water nor food. It's impossible to do without God. Impossible. Yeah. And did it twice.
Yeah, successive fasting. Didn't have time to get over the last one. He's doing it again.
I hear how patient God is. I'm thankful for that.
Oh, absolutely.
My own life, and I hear it here as well. God is very patient with these people.
Yes.
And I hear his love for Moses. He was ready to destroy the people. Moses prayed, and God heard Moses' prayer. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that, I love what the scripture talks about. I'm just amazed the more I read, and I don't know, I've read, we've read this all our life, but the more you stop and think and really take him from day to day, his relationship with the Lord and what God allowed him to do. And of course, I love the imagery there with the burning bush, and yet you get to this text here, it talks about a consuming fire in Deuteronomy, and while the mountain's on fire, God is a consuming fire. In fact, he told him, I'll go before you as a consuming fire, to prepare the land for you to enter. All the things that God is doing for them. And it's just a fight the whole way.
It's
Okay.
still a fight today.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we fight it every day in some way or the other. But God.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot of things we like this. There's our window of watching things on TV is so small, Tanya and I, and we like to watch crime shows, real life crime shows occasionally. And last night, I thought, well, let's just see what's going on. We don't watch it that often. There's this one lady that I tend to like to watch her because she's was a lawyer, but she was a lawyer and she'd been very successful at uncovering cold cases. And I turned it over there, and all of a sudden it started talking about a gruesome crime against 4 people, and I thought, well, we're going to turn this one tonight. Can't handle this one. It was just too gruesome. And then you see the constant gruesomeness, just like the guy that's got executed down in South Carolina. I don't know if you saw that. The guy selected, he was given 3 choices of how to be executed, and he chose to be a firing squad. But his crime was, I think it was his girlfriend's parents, he beat to death with a baseball bat years ago. How gruesome. And so, and then you see the Lord is long-suffering to us. have these jailhouse confessions. And then, I don't know if you've ever read Marshall Robinson's book. I don't know if you knew that, but Marshall wrote a book on being a chaplain, death row chaplain. And he would tell me stories of things that people had done, and he would go and sit with them and visit with them, and their lives would get turned around in prison, because in God, it took a merciful God to help that person get over the guilt, just the guilt of what they've done. And so it's an amazing story. He did tell me, I don't remember if this was in the book or not, but there was a man that was in there that Marshall was visiting. For those of you that, everybody in here knows who Marshall was, correct?
Yes.
Marshall Robinson. There was a guy in there that his wife was gonna leave him. He had probably like 3-6 months left to finish on his term, and she was going to leave. She had had enough waiting on her stuff, whatever. And he told Marshall, he said, "Marshall, if I could just spend one day with her, just one day, I believe I can convince her to wait for the 3 to 6 months." And he convinced Marshall. Marshall drove to the back of the prison, had a blanket and change of clothes in the back, walked him out, being the chaplain there, walked him out the back of that place, put him in the back seat, covered him up with a blanket, drove out, got past the guards, and let the guy spend. He went to a place. He said, "All right," he said, "you'll be here at such and such a time, and when you come back," guy changed clothes, and he went on. And so he went on, and Marshall, I said, "Marshall, how in the world?" He said, "It had to have been the Lord, because when the minute he disappeared from me, he said, 'Oh my God, what have I done?'"
Yeah.
Pastor of Meridian Street Church of God, helps convict escape, get convict.
Yeah.
And so he said the next time rolled around when the guy was supposed to come back, he said, "I didn't sleep a wink that night, couldn't eat that whole 24 hours. He said, "I couldn't eat nothing." The guy showed up, got him in the back seat. He changed back his prison clothes, covered him up with a blanket, took him back in, and walked him back into the prison. He said the guy got out about, I think it was 3 to 6 months later. I can't remember what the time is on it. And he got out, and he said he got connected back to his wife. He said we went over there to visit him and my wife, and he said they treated us like kings. He said, and the rest of his marriage, for the rest of his life, was together. It stayed together. And I said, "Marshall, a state penitentiary, you let somebody out to do that?" He said, "It had to have been God, it had to have been God, it had to have been God." He said, "There's no way you get out of that." And so, yeah. So anyway, just hear Marshall talk about some of the things that he had witnessed and he had seen. And oh, by the way, if you happen to go to Pigeon Forge and you go up there to the place called Alcatraz, that you know that there's a place up there called Alcatraz. It's dedicated to
It's a crime museum.
crime museum is what it is. And inside there is old Sparky, the electric chair that Marshall had walked 6 convicts to that were executed there. And so, but anyway, and Marshall, I think he said everybody he walked to the electric chair except one, their life got turned around in prison. Well, let's continue on here about in Exodus chapter 17, verse 11. And let's see here, 17 and 8. While Israel was encamped at Rephidim, Amalek comes to fight. Moses commands Joshua to select troops and to fight while he stands on top of the hill with the staff of God. And then we see when Joshua and his men fight, Moses, Aaron, and Hur ascend the hill where Moses holds up his hands. When Moses' hands are up, Israel prevails. When they fall, Amalek prevails. Aaron and Hur hold up Moses' hand until the sun goes down, and Joshua overwhelms Amalek with the sword. Then in verse 14 of chapter 17, God commands Moses to write this in a book and to repeat it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You've got a pretty tough future coming if the Lord has somebody to write something down that's going to happen to you. No, it don't look good for you. Then Moses builds an altar, names it, the Lord is my banner, and proclaims a hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. In chapter 18, Jethro reunites Moses with his family. Jethro proclaims, the Lord is greater than all gods, offers burnt offerings and sacrifices to God, and eats bread with Moses and Aaron and Israel's elders before God. I find that to be a very interesting text there itself, the way that it's written. And then lastly in chapter 18 there, at Jethro's suggestion, Moses delegates some of the judging responsibilities to a hierarchy of judges. And then we move to the section regarding on Mount Sinai. Any thoughts or any questions or that you'd like to convey as we've got to move to this section? Okay. It reads in the next section, and Karen, I'll be happy to get you this narrative that we're following up. I didn't bring any extra ones with me today. We're on page 3 on the section that says on Mount Sinai. Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
On the third moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, the people entered the wilderness of Sinai and camped at the base of the mountain. And then the following things happened there. Moses ascends the mountain 3 times, relaying messages between God and Israel in preparation for the covenant ceremony. And then God gives the 10 commandments in the hearing of the people. The people stand far off, out of fear, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Moses receives rules about altars, the covenant code, and the promise of conquest. And I know you kind of just jumped from high point to high point in reading all this, but man, there's just so much that took place. It's astounding. Exodus 24 there, Moses and the Israelites perform the covenant ceremony. They build an altar, sends young men off to offer sacrifices, throws blood against the altar, reads the book of the covenant in the hearing of the people who respond with an oath, throws the remainder of the blood of the covenant on the people. And then Exodus 24, I find this very interesting as well. Turn to Exodus 24 in your Bibles. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 elders partially ascend the mountain where they all see and dine with God. Doesn't that capture your interest? Let's go to Exodus chapter 24. I have to get there with my finger, but the pages wouldn't stick. 24 and verse 9 through 11. Then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. And under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. Yet he did not reach out with his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel. And they saw God, and they ate and drank. I find that to be extremely interesting. They would be able to see God and survive. To what extent did they see? We don't know.
How do you adjust this to God telling Moses, you can't look on me and live?
I'm thinking that too.
Yeah. I wish I had a great answer for you, but I don't. It's just as clear as it can be. And not just Moses, all these others. I mean, it even names Nadab and Abihu, and we know what they do later on. But yet they're there. I mean, Judas sat with Jesus, went with Jesus.
Or was this perhaps Jesus meeting with these elders?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that currently because I don't know what is implied here or what, if there's something special about this Hebrew word about God here. I don't know. But obviously, he would not be in his full glory, but the way that it reads, as you're looking at it, it says in verse 11, yet he did not reach out his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel. So we know that they were prohibited from touching the mountain, ascending the mountain, much less touching it at times. But here, they were allowed for some reason. And so it's just, your mind goes in 50 different directions about thinking about this, yeah. Let's see here, let me find my spot again. Oh, me, yes. Exodus 24, Moses enters and inhabits that cloud for 40 days and 40 nights. During this time, Moses received detailed instructions about, here's another time he goes up there. Let's see here. Let me back up to verses 13 through 17. Moses ascends Mount Sinai where the glory of the Lord dwells and manifests itself in a fiery cloud. Then he receives the instruction of the construction of the tabernacle, its furnishings, clothing, and consecration of the priest, who is to build it all. And God shows Moses the pattern that he is to emulate when assembling the final product. And then God emphasizes the Sabbath as a sign of the covenant. And then God gives Moses the 2 tablets of the testimony, the tablets of stone, written with the finger of God, which were to be placed in the Ark of the Covenant. And then this morning, as I was reading in Romans chapter 8, and verse 3 and 4. For what the law was powerless to do, in that it was weakened by the sinful nature, God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful man to be a sin offering. And so he condemned sin in sinful man in order that the righteous requirements of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the sinful nature, but according to the Spirit. With all the things that we read here, with all the things, the instructions, all these things, it still lacked the power to do exactly what needed to be done, that could only be done through Jesus Christ. Any other thoughts about that? Then we move on to the section about the golden calf. Moses is on the mountain. The Israelites fashion a golden calf with Aaron's aid. As we move through this, God becomes angry and wants to consume them and make a great nation out of Moses instead. Moses convinces God to relent by appealing to his reputation in Egypt and his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Moses is enraged when he sees the idol and smashes the tablets of the testimony. Moses burns the calf, grinds it to powder, scatters the remains in the water, and makes the people drink it. Moses confronts Aaron, who denies his role, calling the people set on evil, and said, I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. A tall tale. It's enough that we've done this. Now I'm going to tell you a big old fat lie. Moses asked, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." The sons of Levi come forward, and Moses commands a massacre resulting in the death of 3,000 men. Moses blesses the tribe of Levi, saying, "Today you have been ordained for service." Moses asked for the Israelites' forgiveness. God decides to blot out the sinners from his book and visit their sin upon them by sending a plague upon the people. Okay. Then, of course, that whole depiction of how that all takes place on the screen cannot capture, not even close, what it was like. But I'm sure it was a very powerful moment that happened. Okay, move to the next section. After the golden calf incident, God decides that it would be safer for the people if he stays in the wilderness and sends an angel on the journey in his place. And Moses changes God's mind by appealing to their personal relationship in Exodus 33. And then we have another sequence of events to read there. Moses pitches the tent of meeting outside the camp. Wherever he entered it, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand on the entrance while God spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Moses asked to know God's ways so that he may know God and continue to find favor in his sight, despite the geographical separation. He argues that neither he nor the people will know if they have found God's favor unless he goes with them. Furthermore, it is God's proximity and interaction with Israel that makes them distinct among the nations, and Moses distinct among the people. God agrees because Moses finds favor in his sight, and God knows him by name. It's amazing what kind of difference we can make in the life of other people by interceding on their behalf. Have you ever thought about your prayers and how it may impact or affect someone else? Moses asked to see God's glory, and this is kind of back to the same thing with what Al was talking about. You read here, it says, Moses asked to see God's glory, so God shields Moses in the cleft of the rock, covering him with his hand, and he passes by and proclaiming his own name. God removes his hand, allowing Moses to see his backside, since no man can see God's face and live. It's kind of interesting. It seems like there's some kind of it's contradictory to what we read a while ago, doesn't it? The only explanation that I could come up with, or I could think of right now, off the fly, would be that there is levels of revelation that God is allowing. That when he allowed them to see him, I don't know what they were allowed to see. As far as that goes, it's interesting that what the disciples were able to see on the Mount of Transfiguration, those that were there. There are certain things that God has allowed, and there's levels of himself that he reveals.
We're permitted today to be filled with the Holy Spirit, but we've never seen him.
Yes, Karen.
Just reflecting some on that question, I was thinking about it. There are other places in the Old Testament where individuals are said to have seen God or to seen the face of God, even the face of God, and lived. You see that, Abraham, of course, is visited by the three, who some scholars believe is representative even in the Old Testament of Trinity, but that's debated. And of course, we see Samson's parents who saw God and lived, and Jacob, who wrestled with the man of God, and of course questions about that, but he was said to have seen the face of God and lived. So we have other examples in the Old Testament of individuals who have seen God in some sense and lived, and I think you're right. I think there's this sense in which, you know, I think it's kind of implied maybe as we look at those different cases, that God gave special grace, special provision, special protection, levels of revelation, however you want to talk about that. You know, that God made special exceptions in those cases with these particular individuals, where they were allowed to encounter God in these very personal ways, and yet live to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, and it stands to reason that there's no way we could handle the fullness of God in how he would reveal himself. So it's by his grace and his desire to reveal himself to us that he reveals just enough what we need, or what we need at the moment, and different things about him. There's so much to know about God that we read it in the text here, and we still don't have a handle on it. And so, yeah, thank you, Karen. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Can I share something different?
Sure, go ahead.
Verse 12, I love kind of an intimate conversation here. Moses said, "See, you say, bring up this people, but you have not let me know who you will send with me." And then I love verse 14. God said, "My presence will go with you." And I love this part, "and I will give you rest." So oftentimes I read that verse for myself. God's going to give me rest. I need that often. But it's always interesting to me that God says to Moses, "My presence will go with you." And he doesn't say, "I'm going to empower you," or "I'm going to make you victorious," or whatever. He says, "I will give you rest." So there's something God sees that Moses needs rest. So I can identify with that. So my presence will go with you. And I love that verse. "And I will give you rest." Verse 14.
Yeah. Yes, and I can say that sometimes my body can rest, but I wish my mind could rest.
Yeah, that's powerful to me.
Yes, yes it is. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I was speaking to a friend last night that he was in the hospital the day before, and he's an older gentleman, and I was speaking to him, and I said, "I didn't know he was in the hospital." Went to the ER, he said, "I wasn't feeling good." I said, "Well, what doctor say?" He said, "He told me to rest."
Wow.
His wife was sitting right there next to him, and I said, "Do you know what that word means?" Because he's a go, 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 go kind of guy, just wired to go. And he goes all the time. He don't ever rest. You know what I'm talking about. And so, yes, I agree, yeah. Well, let's stop right there at that point. Thank you, Keith, for sharing that. Do we have any prayer requests? Did anyone